Imagine standing on a dark street lit only by sodium lamps, hearing a high-pitched whine that sounds nothing like the deep growl of traditional engines. It's the unmistakable song of the 1992-2002 Mazda RX-7 FD, a machine that defied every convention and yet became a global street icon. At a glance, it looked almost too delicate for its era. Low-slung curves, impossibly wide headlights, and a body that seemed sculpted more by imagination than regulation. But beneath that form was a rotary engine that challenged physics and patience in equal measure. Most cars of its time were judged by horsepower or cylinders, yet the RX-7 FD insisted on rewriting the script with a twin-turbocharged 13B engine barely larger than a backpack. It made enthusiasts feel like they were holding lightning in their hands, but only if they could live with the volatility that came with it. The paradox was irresistible. A car simultaneously fragile and ferocious, adored and misunderstood, capable of humiliating rivals on track days, yet equally capable of leaving its owner stranded in the driveway. That duality, the love and the curse, turned the RX-7 FD into more than transportation. It became an obsession, a cultural export, and ultimately a legend, one that still sparks debate decades after the last unit rolled off the line. This isn't just about horsepower or lap times. It's about why a risk like this could only have come from Mazda at that specific moment, and how that decision echoes in today's car culture. If you enjoy diving into stories where design gambles become myths, make sure to like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me which machine you want explored next. The Mazda RX-7 FD, launched between 1992 and 2002, entered the automotive world as a radical answer to a conservative era in performance. The early 90s were dominated by bigger engines, stricter emissions, and a shift towards safer, heavier cars. Yet Mazda chose to double down on lightness, fluidity, and the eccentricity of a rotary heart. It was a decision that baffled industry insiders but electrified enthusiasts. The RX-7 FD was never going to be a car for everyone, but maybe that was the point. It was a statement that driving could be about purity, not compromise. Micro story. The first time many Americans saw the RX-7 FD in the flesh, it was likely glowing red on a showroom floor in 1993. Its rounded silhouette stood out against the boxier shapes of rivals, and its retractable headlights gave it a playful, futuristic air. People often didn't know what they were looking at. Was this Japanese sports car meant to take on supercars, or was it just a quirky experiment? That mystery pulled in dreamers, the kind of people who weren't afraid to try something new. Mazda had crafted not just a car, but a spark that ignited curiosity. Context Digest. Mazda's faith in the rotary didn't come from thin air. The company had been refining rotary technology since the 60s, chasing smoother power and lower weight compared to piston engines. By the early 90s, their rotary program was mature enough to produce consistent performance at scale. While rivals were investing in displacement wars, Mazda bet that refinement of a unique concept could give them a competitive edge. The RX-7 FD represented the peak of that belief. Reflection bridge. The gamble of pursuing rotary perfection was as much philosophical as mechanical. Micro story. For the engineers, building the 13B Rebu twin-turbo engine was like walking a tightrope. On one side, they had the potential for lightweight performance that felt razor-sharp. On the other, the inevitable issues of heat, apex seals, and fuel thirst. The sequential turbo setup, with one turbo spooling at lower revs and the other joining at higher speeds, was exotic technology for its time. Owners described the acceleration as a wave cresting and then exploding, a feeling that piston cars struggled to replicate. But beneath the thrill lurked the question: how long could it last before the engine demanded attention? Context Digest. Ownership reality in the 90s revealed that the RX-7 FD required more devotion than most sports cars. Regular maintenance, specialized knowledge, and even driving style played critical roles in keeping the car alive. This wasn't the kind of vehicle you casually commuted with. It demanded respect and rewarded those who gave it. That selective filter naturally created a community of owners who were more like caretakers than consumers. Micro story. On US roads, the RX-7 FD quickly developed a dual reputation. Track day drivers adored its near-perfect weight distribution and delicate steering, which made it dance through corners in a way that belied its modest horsepower figures. Meanwhile, daily drivers often cursed the quirks, starting in cold weather, high fuel bills, and mechanics unfamiliar with rotary engines. Yet the frustrations never truly killed the allure. In fact, they amplified it. as though Mazda had created a car that separated enthusiasts from casuals by design. Reflection bridge. It became clear that the RX-7 FD was less a car and more a litmus test for passion. Context digest. Pricing positioned the RX-7 FD between attainable sports cars and high-end exotics, which left it floating in a strange space. It was faster than many of its price peers but less practical. More affordable than exotics but carrying a stigma of fragility. This tension fueled debate about its true identity. Was it an underdog supercar or a misunderstood oddity? Micro story. Within car clubs and magazines, heated discussions raged over whether the RX-7 FD was genius or folly. One story that stands out is how some buyers snapped them up only to quickly sell after reliability headaches, while others clung to their cars for decades, swearing they'd never drive anything else. That polarity of experience mirrored the very nature of the Rotary itself. Brilliant at its peak, frustrating in its flaws. Mazda hadn't built a product to please everyone. They'd built a product to make people choose a side. Micro story. On racetracks, the RX-7 FD punched above its weight. With skilled drivers, it often embarrassed more powerful rivals thanks to its agility and balance. The car's lightweight chassis allowed late braking and surgical cornering, qualities that became its signature. This wasn't brute force domination. It was finesse, a celebration of precision driving. Watching an FD carve through corners became a spectacle, proof that numbers on paper didn't tell the whole story. Context digest. Market timing, however, worked against it. The 90s saw tightening emission standards and rising insurance rates for sports cars, particularly those imported from Japan. Enthusiasts wanted the FD, but mainstream buyers were wary. Mazda's daring strategy became a double-edged sword. It elevated the brand's image among purists, but limited broader sales success. Micro story. Import tuner culture in the US soon discovered the RX-7 FD as a canvas for expression. The Rotary's compact size meant engine bays could be reimagined, while the sleek lines welcomed body kits, wings, and custom paint. For many, it became more than just Mazda's design. It became theirs, molded to reflect identity. In neighborhoods, on forums, and eventually in films. The FD emerged as a street-level hero, bridging performance with personality. The Mazda RX-7 FD had already begun to carve its myth in garages, racetracks, and car meets, but its next chapter would take the story from dedicated communities to global pop culture, where it would transcend automotive circles entirely. The Mazda RX-7 FD in its 1992-2002 run didn't just stop at being an enthusiast's secret. It evolved into a cultural marker that reshaped how the US viewed Japanese sports cars. When the first FDs hit American shores, they weren't just competing against local muscle or European luxury. They were redefining what a lightweight performance machine could look and feel like. This second phase of its story is about escalation, how a fragile rotary coupe managed to leap from a niche product to a recognized symbol, even when the market seemed stacked against it. Micro story. In Southern California during the late 90s, a group of young drivers began bringing RX-7 FDs to local meets. At first, crowds gathered out of curiosity. Few people had actually seen one up close and fewer still understood its rotary engine. The low, flowing lines looked exotic without the price tag of an Italian rival. Once people heard the high-pitched wail, the RX-7 FD stopped being just a curiosity. It became the heartbeat of a growing import scene. In those gatherings, a legend was cemented. Context digest. The 90s also marked a turning point in US car culture, with import tuning gaining ground on traditional hot rods. The RX-7 FD slotted into this movement seamlessly because it wasn't weighed down by heritage. It was malleable, customizable, and unapologetically different. That flexibility made it a natural candidate for the garage tinkerers who wanted to build something personal. While other cars represented tradition, the FD became a canvas for rebellion. Reflection bridge. Its uniqueness became its passport into new cultural territories. Micro story. As video games like Gran Turismo and later underground racing titles spread into US living rooms, the RX-7 FD's reputation went digital. Suddenly, millions who had never touched a rotary engine were sliding one through virtual corners, learning its quirks on screen. This gamified familiarity meant that when people finally spotted an FD in real life, it was already a celebrity in their minds. Few cars have bridged the gap between pixels and pavement so effectively. Context digest. Film soon amplified that exposure. The RX-7 FD wasn't just a car, it was cast as a character. Its appearances signaled rebellion, speed, and style, shaping perceptions for an entire generation. While rival machines also made cameos, the FD stood out because it looked like nothing else. Its silhouette carried a timeless, almost anime-like quality that camera lenses loved. This wasn't marketing spin. It was organic myth-building, micro-story. Owners who saw their FDs on screen or in games often treated them with renewed reverence. Some parked them in garages, limiting miles to preserve their investment. Others doubled down on modifications, eager to mirror their digital or cinematic counterparts. The divide between stock purity and tuned creativity deepened, but either path reinforced the car's myth. Whether pristine or wildly customized, the RX-7 FD was no longer just metal and rubber. It was storytelling on wheels, reflection bridge. The car was no longer judged solely by its performance, but by the narrative it carried into every environment. Context digest, market economics, however, painted a harsher picture. Sales figures remained modest, and in the US, the FD struggled to survive against tightening emissions laws and limited brand recognition. Mazda eventually pulled the RX-7 FD from American showrooms before the end of its production run, leaving enthusiasts hungry and frustrated. Ironically, that scarcity only deepened its desirability, making it a forbidden fruit in its own country. Micro-story. In the early 2000s, import laws meant that new FDs couldn't officially return to US soil. That limitation turned used models into treasures, with prices spiking even as reliability concerns persisted. Enthusiasts joked that owning an FD was like dating someone volatile but irresistible. You never quite knew what would happen next, but you couldn't walk away. That emotional roller coaster became part of the ownership identity. Micro-story. Meanwhile, in Japan, the RX-7 FD continued its evolution in domestic racing and street culture. Footage of high-speed touge runs and drifting events trickled into US car circles through grainy tapes and early internet forums. Those clips showed the FD at its best, light, agile, seemingly unshakable in the hands of skilled drivers. The imagery fueled fantasies in America, reinforcing the notion that this car was more than machinery. It was a rite of passage for serious enthusiasts. Context digest. By the mid-2000s, the RX-7 FD had crossed from being a niche curiosity into an icon of global car culture. Its legacy was no longer tied to showroom success, but to the emotional grip it held on communities. Whether through games, films, or underground racing folklore, the FD was now mythologized in ways few cars ever achieve. Micro-story. An owner once described the experience of pulling into a meet with an RX-7 FD as walking in with a halo. It wasn't about raw horsepower numbers or lap times anymore. It was about the aura the car carried. Heads turned, conversations started, and people gathered not because it was the rarest or fastest car there, but because it was the one that had captured imaginations across media, cultures, and continents. In that moment, the FD was proof that myth can be engineered as powerfully as any turbocharger. The RX-7 FD had grown beyond Mazda's intentions, crossing oceans and media formats to become a global symbol, but the final stage of its story would reveal how that reputation aged, and what the car means in today's market and memory. The Mazda RX-7 FD, produced from 1992 to 2002, had by now become more than an enthusiast's obsession or a pop culture cameo. It was a benchmark that refused to fade. In its final stretch, the conversation shifted from what the car was to what it represented. A rare case where a flawed machine became untouchable precisely because of its flaws. As owners aged, as regulations tightened, and as the market evolved, the RX-7 FD transformed from a tuner's playground into a collector's prize, cementing its place in automotive history. Micro-story. At first, many who held onto their RX-7 FDs simply did so out of passion. They endured the constant maintenance, the rotary rebuilds, and the scarcity of parts because the car offered an experience nothing else did. But as the years rolled by, those same owners started realizing they were sitting on gold. Auction houses and online listings began recording values climbing into territory once reserved for exotic brands. Suddenly, the same car that was once dismissed as unreliable was being celebrated as a blue-chip investment. Context digest. Collectability often follows scarcity. And in the US, the FD was scarce from the start due to its limited sales and early discontinuation. Factor in the number of cars lost to neglect, racing, or aggressive modifications, and surviving examples became even rarer. By the 2010s, finding an unmodified RX-7 FD in good condition was a near miracle. That rarity drove demand upward, turning garage finds into headline-worthy stories. Reflection bridge. What was once a rebellious choice became a badge of prestige. Microstory. Car meets in the 2010s highlighted this shift. Where once FDs arrived covered in aftermarket aero and bright paint, now you'd see owners proudly showing bone stock survivors, emphasizing authenticity over flash. The crowd treated these cars with a museum-like reverence, circling them as if studying relics of a wilder time. Yet the allure remained unchanged. Whether modified or stock, the FD carried a gravity that made it the centerpiece of any gathering. Context digest. Beyond collectability, the RX-7 FD's cultural impact shaped an entire generation of enthusiasts who later became designers, engineers, and influencers. The memory of driving, seeing, or even virtually racing an FD inspired careers and shaped tastes. Its lightweight philosophy, driver-centric cockpit, and flowing design are cited as influences on modern sports cars, even when manufacturers avoid the Rotary's pitfalls. The FD proved that risk and artistry could coexist in a production car. Microstory. Owners often describe handing their RX-7 FD keys to someone else as a ritual. The new driver quickly learns the quirks, how to rev it properly, how to feel the turbos kick in sequence, how not to flood the engine on startup. That learning curve transforms the relationship. Unlike cars that are instantly accessible, the FD demands patience. Master it, and the car rewards you with a sense of connection unmatched by more predictable machines. That very initiation process keeps the car's mystique alive. Reflection bridge. The RX-7 FD's flaws weren't weaknesses. They were rites of passage. Microstory. In modern times, import laws have opened doors for previously forbidden Japanese models, and enthusiasts often compare them against the FD. Many offer more power, more technology, or more reliability. Yet when asked which car feels like a legend, the RX-7 FD still takes the crown. Its reputation was never about being the most practical choice. It was about embodying purity, daring, and charisma in a way nothing else quite matched. Context digest. Today's market reveals an interesting paradox. While new cars chase ever higher performance numbers, many enthusiasts long for the rawness of something like the FD. Its 280 horsepower rating seems modest by modern standards, but numbers never defined it. Instead, it's remembered for how it made drivers feel, alive, alert, and engaged. That emotional blueprint remains its lasting contribution to automotive history. Microstory. Imagine pulling an RX-7 FD out of a garage today. Neighbors peek out, kids stop mid-bicycle ride, and even casual passersby recognize something special. It's not about nostalgia alone, it's about presence. The FD has aged into a work of rolling art, one that sparks conversation wherever it goes. The paradox of fragility and brilliance now reads as character, the kind of authenticity missing in many modern machines. The Mazda RX-7 FD's final chapter isn't just about survival, it's about transformation. From misunderstood risk to cultural legend to collectible artifact, it completes a cycle few cars ever achieve, proving that sometimes the most daring gambles pay off not in immediate sales, but in timeless legacy. The Mazda RX-7 FD, built from 1992 to 2002, stands as one of those rare machines that grew larger than the company that made it. What started as a risky bet on rotary technology ended up creating a cultural touchstone that transcended sales figures, production numbers, and even performance specs. In the beginning, it was simply Mazda's attempt to perfect an unconventional idea, a sports car that prized lightness and responsiveness over brute force. Along the way, it became an underground hero, a digital icon, a movie star, and eventually a collector's centerpiece. That trajectory tells us more about how cars become legends than any technical manual ever could. Throughout its life, the RX-7 FD proved that identity matters as much as horsepower. Rivals may have boasted larger engines, more reliability, or easier ownership, but none carried the same aura. The Rotary's flaws became folklore, its maintenance demands became a rite of passage, and its scarcity turned into prestige. For American enthusiasts, owning one was never just about transportation. It was a declaration of commitment, a willingness to embrace imperfection for the sake of joy. That spirit gave the FD a timeless quality that newer, more polished machines still struggle to replicate. In today's US market, the RX-7 FD occupies a rare space. It's both a driver's car and an investment piece, equally at home tearing through mountain roads or sitting under a cover in a climate-controlled garage. Collectors chase originality, while tuners chase creative expression, and both groups keep the myth alive. Prices continue to climb, but the car's value is as much emotional as financial. It represents an era when manufacturers were bold enough to gamble on eccentric ideas. For future generations, the RX-7 FD offers a blueprint worth remembering. It shows that a car doesn't need to please everyone to make history. It needs to take risks, inspire loyalty, and deliver experiences that statistics can't measure. That lesson resonates today as car culture navigates the shift toward electrification, autonomy, and increasing regulation. Enthusiasts still crave machines that feel alive, and the FD reminds us what that looks like. The final word is simple. The 1992-2002 Mazda RX-7 FD is not perfect, and that is precisely why it's unforgettable. Its story proves that in a world chasing uniformity, the flawed masterpiece is often the one that endures.